Hey everyone, Shavoso here. Finally getting to my weekly report that was supposed to be done on October 17th at the full moon. But yeah, I've been trying out some new systems, some new cameras. Things have been a little wonky getting things together. So, today is Saturday, the 19th, and I'm just catching up. Yeah, in all honesty, I totally produced all of this and it was completely out of sync and technically impossible. So I'm just going to do it again and only a shortened version so that we cover from the week from the 17th to the 24th when the moon comes square the sun in the waning square after this full moon. So I'm going to get right to the charts and show you what I've been looking at that's been helping me kind of get through this moment in time. It's been an interesting ride for everyone worldwide and personally. I think my impression is that it's been pretty much about relationship and the connections between people and things, the quality of that connection, and making some course corrections on it. And that's been, of course, my experience. I also have detected it in other people's lives as I talk to them, and it's there in the planets, reflected in the planets. Let's just look at the charts and take this back to the full moon on the 17th. What we had was Venus sextile to Pluto, which added a lot of like fire to the mix around relationships and even finances, things that we care about. Suddenly we're being kind of heavily influenced, pushed by this sextile of Pluto's unconscious patterns, its deep needs, its desire for control, desire, passion, power, all of the plutonic things that are fairly destructive in their experience, but of course it's destruction in order to rebuild. And so there's a rebuilding bit to this whole thing that is emphasized by this other strong sextile down here, right at the full moon that we had, of Chiron sextile to Jupiter. And Jupiter, since it's a lucky planet of expansion and optimism and really has this kind of happy go lucky, let's get her done, everything's going to work out fine kind of attitude, with this synergistic healing that comes from Chiron, that we're developing wisdom, that we're utilizing our wisdom, that we're experiencing the need for wisdom around our wounds, around our limitations as human beings, around our illnesses, around our psychological wounds, around our conditioning that isn't in alignment with what's real, right? What's true, what's beautiful about the world. And so there's this healing kind of element to all of this struggle that we've had, strife even. We also have Mars influencing everything from this T square that it's been doing with all of the planets and points in Libra, and Mercury just got into Scorpio. So it was also square Mars a few days ago before this. So moving forward, those elements, especially the Jupiter Chiron, are really long lasting and so pretty influential, right? We've also got this minor grand trine happening here with Neptune retrograde now as the anchor point between a trine and two sextiles called a talent triangle or a minor grand trine, which creates a kind of a flow between all the energies of the planets so that they synergize and manifest sort of like as a background radiation, as a background tone for this. And this goes on, this one I mention a lot because it goes on for several years, really finally fizzles out in 2029, but peaks around 2025, 2026, 2027. It comes off and on. And this is really changing our way of being with the transcendent portion of the universe. It's upsetting the apple cart of our materialist world and sort of requiring us to notice that, oh, yeah, there's a whole lot of reality that isn't just things banging into each other and bouncing off. So there's a metaphysical and a kind of even a religious kind of vibe going on for the next few years that is full of hope and risk, that it's, we can either go to the saints and we all awaken, or we awaken the Inquisition again, or maybe both. Who knows, right? So that's kind of going on in the background. And you can see that there's another minor grand trine that developed with the sextile to Pluto, which is also sextile to Neptune, and a trine between Venus and Neptune. Neptune. And that kind of gave us a bit of dreaminess around our desires, about kind of haziness of not really knowing exactly which end was up. But yeah, the dreaminess can go either way. It can be either delusions of being cheated on, or these intuitions that either this is the perfect relationship or this is the most horrible situation you've ever been in. And it can be kind of overwhelming because with Neptune there's no way to actually pin it down and say, this is a fact, this is true. It's a lot of imagination. And, romance does have a lot of imagination and projection in it. And so it has, Neptune and Venus are kind of related to each other in that way. So it could have been a struggle either way, new affairs and things like that. We also had Venus opposite Uranus, which complicated things earlier in the week, making sudden shifts. Things that seem solid disappear. The foundations crack, tornadoes strike and sort of blow up your beautiful scene. Or you suddenly find a true love, or some amazing, what looks like a magical moment suddenly appears. You're like, whoa, I had no idea that was going to happen. So there could have been some upsets in those personal relationships, but all this is also reflected in the world and in the larger movements of the culture. And so when you're looking at mundane astrology, you can't just take it down to the individual level. It's the weather that we're all in, and it does influence us for sure. But it's also more like global movements. And, I'm looking at some of these bigger, slower moving planets that are basically working on the whole generation or several generations, even though it does get real personal with the Venus right there. What else you got going on is another minor grand trine developing between Mars, Neptune again, and Uranus again. So there's this whole section of flow of energies that, even though they're generally considered benefic aspects, sextiles and trines, all the blue ones, there's another side to everything. It can always do a valence one way or the other. And so if you have synergism between two challenging planets, such as say Mars and Uranus, it can kind of go either way. It can be like, oh, genius, inspiration, sudden insight, sudden innovations, and this sense of going for it, the Thomas Edison kind of we can do this vibe. Or it can be sudden aggression, sudden inflammations of our aggressive tendencies in order to defend ourselves, or to make something change, or to keep something from changing. Mars is all about boundaries and either establishing them or going over them. And Uranus is the planet of sudden disruptions, changes of direction, the new coming in, right? So there's these talent triangles all happening early in the week. And then we move on, and you can see the moon comes around and reinforces each one of these as it goes along. Here we are today on the 19th. You can see the moon is conjunct Uranus. And so we've got a little possibility of a lot of different moods during the day as we go, as this sort of transit passes through. Still not quite grounded. Like, do we really know what is going on? Is this an illusion? Is this a mirage? Is that a rope or a snake kind of thing? Because Neptune is always kind of messing with our hardline facts and distinctions between things. It's more drifty and open-ended and infinite, because it does represent the infinite and transcendent realms, including imagination and including delusions, illusions, and generally not seeing things as they really are. So there's a complication there, right, as it moves along. Fortunately, Venus is coming off of that trine as we move along. The next day, on the 20th, tomorrow, Sunday, here in the West, you can see there's also a square that's kind of like happening between Mars, the Sun, and then as the Sun kind of catches up, it starts to square Pluto. So we've handed off these sextile between Venus and Pluto to a square between the Sun, ourselves, our direction, our soul, our consciousness, our awareness of ourselves, and Pluto, the planet of the hidden, the underground, the what they call chthonic energies. It's really powerful. It's the dark side that has a lot of power to it, that cleanses eventually. It's the roto-rooter of the universe as it moves through the 29th degree of Capricorn and is heading out of Aquarius, heading out of Capricorn into Aquarius. It'll be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. Pluto is definitely sending us messages from the other side, from our hidden sides, from the dark side, from the unconscious, from what our instincts want, right? And that if it's ego driven in a square, you've got this kind of like possibility of power plays perpetrated on you, or you perpetrating them unconsciously, not even really knowing you're doing a trip sometimes. Yeah, the Pluto is seen by its effects, not so much, it's not so much upfront. And that square is definitely, going to make this next few days kind of dicey. Watch what is bubbling up, what's compelling you, what's driving others. Look underneath for the motivations that are less acknowledged and less able to be seen. It's easier to see it in others than ourselves. So good time to check in if you're pulling something or there's something that you've been suppressing. You get called out. The 21st, much the same. You can see that we've got Lilith, the point of the moon that is the farthest away in its orbit. It's a mathematical point. So it's kind of like the exiled and the outside and the unknowable. It's associated with the feminine principle and the dark goddess. And it is conjuncting the south node. And in retrograde, it's going to hit it again on the way back. It's already done it once. And this kind of stirs up our feminine powers, the oppressed rising up, things from our past that were not handled very well and then hidden away. That kind of stuff can come up. It's basically the south node is our past. And so when you get that kind of like, ooh, the mystery out of the past that you swept under the rug, the bill you didn't pay, the time you were less than consensual in your actions with someone, can all kind of come up in big or small ways to bite you on the ass and wake you up. Take accountability, right? Because the past is the root of your future. And so when we make a move to bring the unconscious acts of the past to the front, we have a chance to heal those patterns, or at least become aware of them so they don't run us from behind, and have a better flow in the world. That's the idea. That's what wisdom is all about. And we're always getting taught. So there's this Lilith moment, right? The Sun and Juno had been just conjunct, by the way. And so Juno, being the asteroid of committed partnerships and relationships, marriage traditionally, and the good wife. And so there's that kind of feminine energy that is squaring Pluto. So there's a lot still going on in the relationship realms, even though we're coming off of that healing opposition, where we were really confronted over the last few weeks with a lot of relational healing opportunities and necessities. Now it's like, okay, let's do it. Jupiter sextile to Chiron, and it's kind of coming off of it now. They're both retrograde. By the 22nd, interestingly, we've had some things change signs. Obviously, Venus is in Sagittarius now, and that's going to lighten things up. We're 1 day away from or hours away from the sun getting into Scorpio, which is going to deepen things. So now Venus is starting to feel lighter and more playful and fun in Sagittarius, and the sun is about ready to get real serious there with Mercury in Scorpio, because Scorpio does not mess around, and yet it's watery and deep and dark, and so indirect. It's more like knowing something without being able to articulate it. It's more like deep feelings and intuitions that are hard to rationalize and explain where they come from. But this is where Scorpio kind of gets its reputation as difficult and jealous and possessive, because they kind of know something's up, and something is always up. So as the moon transits through Scorpio, secrets may be revealed. We may be feeling we have insights into something deeper than the surface reality. So that's coming up. By the time we get to the 3rd, there it is. Sun's now 0 degrees of Scorpio, and we're beginning that transit with Juno coming right along behind. Venus, even though it's in Sagittarius and doing some light work, is also trying to the North Node and the South Node, sextile to the South Node, which means that our relationships are still working in the realms of our life direction, that there's a direct connection between how we are relating to our Venusian reality and where we're going in life, what we've done in the past and where we're going. So it's kind of profound. It does feel like a kind of a heavy time to be alive. You can see that Mars is now really coming into a solid trine with Neptune, which is not an easy combination, because Mars wants to know exactly which way to go and which battle to fight, and Neptune is not going to give you an answer. You could be shadow boxing with fears, or it could be that moment of inspired movement without really thinking, just like, oh, you made the right move at the right time, right? So it can kind of go either way, especially with this upcoming and more exact sextile with Uranus, and obviously sextile with Neptune. It's a pretty intense kind of minor grand trine down here that's pushing us to change something, but not knowing exactly what the outcome is or which way we're supposed to go. It's a bit of a foggy time. And that's going to be interesting, because you can see that as we move along, Mars is getting closer and closer to a direct opposition to Pluto, which really doesn't happen until the 3rd of November, right before the elections. And that opposition between Pluto and Mars is kind of scary. It is kind of like, oh, things can erupt very easily. Things can be revealed or initiated that are affecting all of us for a long time, that were hidden, that are attempted to be hidden, thinking like revealing of UFOs and that kind of energy, but also eruption of violence and war and these kind of things can come out of our unconscious fears and desires and needs. And with the opposition there, Mars is kind of triggered by all of that. And so that is happening right around the election, which is concerning. And it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. That takes us to the square with the sun and my truncated report. I feel like we're just kind of on the backside of the hill of some of this relational stuff. I mean, obviously it goes on and on. It never really ends. None of the planets just disappear off the grid just because they're not aspecting something, but they're usually aspecting something somewhere, right? And so we'll always be dealing with relationships and finances and Venusian things and Plutonic things. It just manifests differently in everyone's lives. And it depends a lot on on our birth chart. If you want to look into the future or present or past of your life and see how it's relating to what the planets say, it's imperative that you have your birth chart, because this is just the general weather. This is where the planets are in the sky right now. And how they relate to you personally is going to have everything to do with your own birth chart. So that's the report for this week. We'll move forward next week, and you can see that things are coming along as we get near to the full moon. There's plenty more action coming up with all of these planets. Anyway, love you guys. Talk to you soon.